So, welcome to the LOC Connection series. This is the second of our recordings, and Sheila Schweiger is going to present some really cool stuff on quilting. And so, we're really lucky to have Sheila and her talent as part of the LOC. So, thank you, Sheila, before you even start. And I would ask the gallery, just please go around and introduce yourself and what company you represent before Sheila gets started. So, Marianne, you're on the top of my screen. So, Marianne.
Marianne Durso, C4.
And Catherine.
Catherine Ortman, I3.
And Anna.
Anna Smith, I3.
Jenny.
Jenny Lennox, C1.
She's also first reg. Mary Lou.
Mary Lou Noska, fourth reg, B4.
And Shannon.
Shannon Hawkins, C1.
Okay, thank you. And I asked the gallery, the guests to mute themselves, and I am going to share Sheila's slides and let her begin. And thank you, Sheila, for sending your slides.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Well, this is how to make a quilt in 11 easy steps. This is very basic, but I just want to give a little bit of background on my sewing. I'm so glad you all are attending tonight. This is thrilling for me. My family is from Southwest Missouri. They've come through Arkansas, Tennessee, Alabama, and my dad's side of the family is part of the McCoy and Hatfield feud, the McCoy side. So this is how Southern we get. And Pam knows any girl that has a Southern heritage, sewing is part of their raising up through the ranks of adulthood. I mean, that is part of being Southern. You learn how to sew. It kind of stopped with me, though. My grandmother, of course, sewed. My mother sewed, but I'm the only child and grandchild that sews. So, but my daughter sews, and my granddaughter is beginning to sew. So I'm hoping to pass that down. Even though I lived in San Diego for the first 10 years of my life, my dad was in the Navy. Missouri is home. And so when I say we're going home, I mean Southwest Missouri. And we've kind of made a 50-year big circle around the world and have come back to Missouri. So here I am to teach you a little bit. Tonight I'm going to be doing a quick presentation on how to construct a very quick lap quilt. And it's a West Point theme. And so let's get started. Pam, you want to do the first slide?
Sure.
Okay. The first slide is you're going to determine your quilt pattern. This is a 30 block pattern. It is very, very easy. Each block is 8 by 8. And there's the how many you need over to the left. Next, let's go next to the next slide. You're going to get started by ironing all your fabric. Ironing is very, very important to any kind of sewing. I used to do a lot of clothing, garment sewing when I was growing up, especially as a teenager. You know, I made all my homecoming stuff and prom dresses and all that stuff because that's just the way it was. And so ironing is extremely important. Then your next slide. Then you're going to cut your fabric into 8-inch blocks. I did the West Point 77 crest for the middle of the quilt, and because I do have an embroidery machine, and I wanted that in the middle. So you're going to have 10 8-inch blocks of the gold, the gray, 9 of the black blocks, and 1 crest. You're cutting those all out, and you're going to iron again. Next slide. well, go back to step 3 for just a second. The picture on the left is a rotary cutter. That's what I use to cut the fabric with. It makes it much easier with a quilting ruler. I don't know how many, let me ask this, how many of you all do so already?
I do.
I do.
You do. Catherine?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, okay.
I did I made my own wedding dress.
Oh, good for you, Catherine. Good for you. That's kind of the basic thing, other than you need pins and clips and scissors and thread, basic sewing machine, of course. So let's go to step 4. Okay, you're going to check the layout on the design wall. I have a design wall that Mike built me when we first moved into the house. My sewing room is quite big, actually. It's 42 feet long and I think 18 feet wide. And he built me a design wall because he is just wonderful. He just brought me a cup of coffee too, and I think that's great. So I just, as I get the blocks sewn together, I refer back to the pattern to make sure that I have the blocks in the right pattern, you know, and designed on the wall. You get one on the wall, then you just kind of glance back up at it. You're going to sew each block. You're going to sew each block together. Next slide, Pam. Let's go to the next slide. You're going to make a 5-block row by sewing all of the 8-inch blocks together, referring back to the pattern. This is very simple to do. And then you're going to iron them, and you're going to try to iron the light fabric to the dark fabric. Sometimes that will not always work out because you want your seams to nest when you are sewing them together. You may have to do it, but in garment sewing, you always sew and iron your seams flat. But in quilting, you do not. You sew with a 1/4 inch seam, and it's ironed light fabric to dark fabric, such as the gold will be over to the black. So the black does not show through to the gold when you get it all together.
Okay.
I hope everybody understands. If you have questions after all of this, please, let's just go ahead and wait until the very end. And so after you sew these all together, next slide, Pam, you're going to sew your rows together. Looking at that pattern on the slides here, the first row will go and be sewn to the second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth. Really easy, but try to be very careful when you are sewing them together to try to match up your seams and nest the seams so the blocks, you know, don't have any extra on the edge. It makes it a little bit neater, and little pieces, you know, are not going to kill the quilt, because when you start to quilt it, you can kind of cover that up with the quilting. But try to keep your seams so they're very aligned with each other. And that's where the measurement of the 8 inches is so important when you cut. You want everything to be exactly the same, and they should nest and be good. And after you get like the first one sewn to the second row, iron it. Okay, iron that row before you put on the third row. Iron again. Iron everything. Let me see here. That is it really for putting the blocks together. next one I'm going to do now is the border. You're going to add a border. I've added a black 3-inch border to this quilt. The border frames your quilt. You don't want the raw edges showing. You want some type of a border to frame the quilt. I've used black. In this one, you attach the border top first, bottom second, and then each side. It doesn't matter what side you want, third or fourth, but top and bottom first, then your side. And some of these pictures are probably not going to be great because I did choose a West Point theme with the black fabric, but I think you probably get that. And let's go to the next one because we're going to start quilting this. Now I have a long arm machine, which is 14 feet long, so I can load big quilts onto it. Most people will probably not have this quilter. You can always quilt on your domestic machine, doing a stitch in the ditch or dropping your feed dogs and quilting on your domestic machine. It's not real hard if you have a small quilt. Makes it very difficult if you have a bigger one. This is a lap quilt. This is for things such as people in wheelchairs or just reclining at night watching the Angels beat the hell out of the Yankees. But anyway.
That can be deleted.
or the Chiefs winning, okay? So it's a lap quilt. It's not going to take a whole lot of time. Getting it loaded onto the long arm takes a little bit because you want to pull it as tight as you can. I use the red snappers to attach it to. Let's go to the next slide, which is 8B. I put the backing on first. That was the backing of the quilt. You do the backing first. The next step is you're going to load the batting onto the top of the backing. The batting I normally use is 100% cotton or an 80-20 cotton polyester. This is the middle of the quilt that makes it a quilt. You have to make it tight too, so you don't have a gap on the edges. It makes it much easier and neater to quilt if you can get it tight. Okay, now go on to the, I think it's 8C. Okay, then you're going to lay your quilt top onto the batting. This is going to be your sandwich, which we call the sandwich of the quilt. This completes it, the backing, the batting, and the top of the sandwich. I clip it on with these big clips that you can get at Harbor Freight or anywhere, and we're going to get ready to quilt it. Let's go to the next one, which is quilting. Now you can see how it's actually going to get quilted on the long arm. This is what it looks like. You pull the handles toward you and quilt in front. I do quilt from behind the machine also with pentagrams with a laser light. You follow a pattern with a laser light in the back. And so it has handles in the back too. This is the easiest thing to do, which is meandering. To me anyway, I like to do this because it is so quick and easy, and you're not going to make any mistakes. And for some reason, your quilt isn't exactly squared up on the quilting frame, you're not going to have the pattern flip off to the side on one side and it not be straight. I do this a lot because this is my least favorite thing to do. I do not like to quilt. I like to sew the quilt tops together. And I actually like to do the binding. We'll do that in a minute, but I don't really like to quilt, to tell you the truth. So let's go to the next slide. I think that is, okay, you're going to cut your edges, which means after you take it off the machine, unload it, put it on your cutting table or the floor or someplace big, you're going to cut the edges, being careful not to cut the quilt itself. I mean, you're going to cut the batting and the backing off, basically. So you're going to do that all the way around. And next slide. Good pair of scissors are always handy. I've only got about 25 pairs of scissors till I find the ones I like. The binding. The binding is going to take the most time. Actually, you wouldn't think that, but it does. I cut 3-inch strips for the binding that I want to go around the edge of the quilt. Sometimes I will make a contrasting color. I believe in this one I'd use black, but you can use the gray. Yeah, I use black in this one. So you're going to cut 3-inch strips, sew them together. Then you're going to fold them in half lengthwise and iron. You can see the picture to the left is the 3-inch binding strip laid flat, and the gray strip is folded. And then you're going to iron. You're going to sew them all together. Then next slide. Let's see if we have the next slide. Okay, this part here is you're adding the binding to the front of the quilt, which means you're going to sew the raw edges together, the binding to the front, sew the raw edges together all the way around, making your mitered corners, which can be a little bit difficult, but with a lot of practice, it works out. It works out real well. So you do that with the machine. Now the next slide, you're going to flip the binding to the back and use clips or pins. I like to use clips. And you're going to clip it all in place, all the way around. Then you're going to hand sew it. Now there's different methods of binding. This is my chosen method. I like to hand sew. So I sew the binding on the back of the quilt with hand sewing. It takes about 2 hours for this small quilt. Some people are really good at sewing the entire binding. After they get them all clipped together, they use the machine to top stitch the binding. I have a real hard time matching up those seams. One is not going to match up on the front, or they're not going to match up on the back. I think it looks a little messy, but if you really want to go fast and you really don't care, you can do that. I prefer to do it this way, though it takes longer to do. Some people will use a little bit of the edge instead of cutting the backing fabric right next to the top. They will leave about a 2-inch leftover fabric, and they will flip that to the front of the quilt and fold it over and then zigzag stitch. I've done a lot of quilts that way. I still prefer the hand stitching, but that is basically what you do. That's how you're going to make a quilt. Now, I know I went through this very, very quickly. We probably have a lot of time left, but the secret you have to iron, 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 iron. And that is basically it. Next slide, Pam. This is the finished quilt when it gets all done. Super easy, super fast, and very versatile for us West Pointers. And I think that's about it, Pam.
Yay.
Yeah. Sheila, that was wonderful. Okay, so we open it up to questions. You can take your
Right.
mutes off.
So I just have to say, Sheila, so my mama was born and raised in this house, so I know what you're talking about, sewing and all. So my grandma and all of her sisters, they sewed, they did needlework. I have needlework all over the house from them. My mom knits. My aunt made wedding dresses for all of her girls. I can sew, I can crochet. I have no patience for it. So what you do is just phenomenal. I also have a best friend. She's actually made 2 quilts for Steve and I, one for our wedding and then one for our 10th anniversary.
Oh.
And yeah, I mean, her work is just beautiful, and your guys' talent is just amazing.
Well, I'm not that great, but it is my relaxation, my very, I love to do it. I'm so glad that my girls know how to sew. I made them take lessons when they were little kids. I did not teach them because I knew I'd probably kill them, but I made them go to a seamstress for lessons. Jerry, my youngest one that was just here last weekend for apple butter making days, she brought a quilt that she made for her daughter's cheer coach. And it's very simple, black and white, or green and white blocks with a cheer t-shirt in the middle. And she learned how to use the machine, the long arm, and so I'm so happy that she's passing all of that down too. Now, I have my grandmother's old treadle singer machine, and I remember used to sit on the floor while she treadled along and sewed, and I drew inside of her little doors where the machine sat, and I had to go back to California, from California back to Missouri one summer. I happened to have a convertible, and
you sew it all the way through. Now we're wondering about your corners, if they're triangles, or how do you fold?
That's a mitered corner. That is a little bit difficult, but with practice you can that out. There's a lot of YouTube videos on how to place your binding over each other at the corner, and then you just sew about 1/4 of an inch to the side. You don't sew all the way over to the side. Then you can do your mitered corners that way. It does take practice. It does take practice. I don't always get it right, but I get it pretty darn close too. So it just, that, and who was it? Was it Mary Lou?
Yeah.
How it does, it makes that triangle.
Yeah, that triangle. Yeah.
It makes that triangle. Yeah.
Okay, I have a question, Sheila. So I sew, and we use 5/8, and I noticed that we're not using 5/8. It was
Not
a very
quilting. Quilting, you use 1/4 inch seam.
1/4 inch seam.
Garment sewing, you're going to use the 5/8 inch or the 3/8 inch. Yes.
But
I also
mine is
have
1/4 inch.
a serger machine and a cover stitch machine, and those machines will give you the finished edges of your garment. If you flip over your jeans and stuff, that will give it cuts the fabric and sews all together. And that's what I use. I'm a short person. I'm 5 feet tall. I can't find any kind of, it's hard for me to find jeans that are not a foot too long. So you can, the serger machine, if we do another one of these videos and we go on to a little bit more advanced, maybe I could do something there too, but this is a really fast 30-minute introduction, you
I
know.
have a question too. When you cut the binding strips, do you do it on the bias or straight?
Yeah, you can do it by putting them together. I didn't bring that up, but I'm glad you did, Anna. Yes, you're going to sew it on the bias, which makes it a little bit stretchy. Okay, you're not going to do it on the straight grain of the fabric. You're going to do it on the bias so it has a little bit of give and stretch to it. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. That's another thing that we could talk about later.
Cindy?
Okay, since I'm not a sewer, I'm a supporter. Are you selling those 77 quilts? How do I buy one?
No. We're going to go into, Cindy, we're going to go into that a little bit later, okay?
Yeah, 'cause I'm thinking that's a great Christmas present for my husband.
Well, this is going to, I'm not going to say anything yet because I have to get into making several of them.
Okay.
And so, you know, there's going to be
I want to
some,
be top of the list.
you want to be, you all girls that attended this little intro.
Well,
No, there's you'll get one, Cindy. Trust me, you'll get one at some point.
well, I'm hearing that we need an advanced session. We need
Open my mouth, didn't I?
we need, raffles for the 50th. Things. Okay, so Sheila, we're so thankful that you are so willing to share your talents, and I know I have been her friend since I was 18, so I've received quilts before, and so Sheila, I treasure everything that you have done and shared with us. Any last parting thoughts, Sheila, that you want us to take? Her license plate, I have to tell you, says to quilt, and so
Yeah.
she's a
I
quilt.
didn't, I didn't even get that. I came home one day and there it was on the back of my car, and I go, well, that's Michael. He is such a
Oh, that's lovely.
That was a great present.
yes, it was. It was like, wow, thank you, baby, thank you. Yeah, he's great. He supports my very expensive habit because it can get expensive. It really can. Most hobbies can. Do what you love, do what you want, and do what you love. Retirement is great because now it's the best days of my life are cold, rainy, snowy days, and I just go downstairs, you know, and sew all day long.
Woman cave.
Well, thank you, Sheila, again, and we really appreciate what you shared with us. And so-
Okay,
so hang
thanks
out
for
with
tuning in,
us.
everybody.
All right, bye-bye. Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.